Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let me say, we pay the tax we're required to pay in every country in which we operate,
well,
including the UK.
It depends where you choose to put the business, doesn't it? Depends where you choose to put the business. This is what all this afternoon is about.
With a very clear message today. Most people pay their taxes, a few don't, and those few we are coming after.
You're a company that says you do no evil, and I think you do evil in that you use smokes and mirrors.
I don't think it's a matter of,
tax.
but I think tax is not a matter of choice. Tax is a matter of following the laws that are there internationally.
We've all heard today, how you define it.
Today we announced we're going to be paying more tax in the UK. The rules are changing internationally, and the UK government's taking the lead in applying those rules, so we'll be changing what we're doing here. When the rules change, that you should change with them, and we've done that.
This is a real vindication of this government's approach. When I became Chancellor, there were some companies that paid little or no tax, and that rightly caused a lot of public anger. We said we'd take action. Now we have companies like Google paying tax.
This is too little too late. At least we've got something, but to be frank, it looks as though what independent assessors have said, this is only paying about 3% of tax. Most corporations are paying 20%, ordinary individuals are paying much more than that, so I think most people will just think it's unfair.
Well, we did ask Google and Her Majesty's Revenue and Custom to appear on our programme this morning, but they both declined. So we can talk about it now with Dame Margaret Hodge, who has grilled Google bosses before when she was chair of the Public Accounts Committee. Also with us, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, a Conservative MP who is currently on the committee, Lucian Bartram, a small business owner, and also Steve Lewis, who runs a coffee shop in Crickhowell in the Welsh Valleys. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Margaret, first of all, we've seen you grilling the bosses of Google. What do you think about this £130 million?
It's absurd, really. Just think about it. Last year, this is £130 million over 10 years. Last year, Google earned £6.4 billion from addresses here in the UK. £6.4 billion. Now, we've no idea the profit they made on that, and all we're really asking that on the profits they make, they should pay a fair amount of tax. And I think the real answer to this, and I hope the debate will move into this area, we've got to stop hiding behind the confidentiality of taxpayers' interest, so that none of us really understand here what the assets are that Google own here, what the turnover is that they make, what the profits that they make. I think that's now got to be open, particularly for big companies that are quoted anywhere on the stock exchange. And once they're open, we can see the profits they make, and then we can tax those profits in a fair way.
Would you want to hazard a guess at what you think would be a fair share as far as you're concerned for Google to be paying? 2.77% is what this amount equates to.
I haven't a clue. None of us have a clue, and that's what's so frustrating. What we do know from having delved into Google's global accounts is that outside America, the UK is their biggest market. About 11% of the money they earn outside America is made here. And what we also know is what they do. They don't bill it here in the UK. They bill it in Ireland. And when we did that inquiry 2 or 3 years ago, what was so shocking was when the first time Google came to see us, they said, we don't do business here, we do business in Ireland. When you do a deal with Google, you do it in Ireland. I then was inundated with whistleblowers who were people who'd worked for Google, who work for Google, who said, we are selling advertising here in the UK. We are closing deals here in the UK. We had journalists looking at LinkedIn profiles of Google employees. They were all salespeople here in the UK. Yet because of this secrecy that surrounds the tax system, we're not allowed to know. And for most of us, I mean, all 85%, I don't know if you do, but all the rest of us pay our taxes through the PAYE system. You will do. All of us do that. We pay it unquestioningly. And for us to find that the big multinational corporations establish these really artificial company structures which have no other purpose than to avoid tax is just basically unfair. It's unjust and unfair, and we're not all being treated equally by the taxman.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan, £130 million first of all. Is that a good deal for the taxpayer?
No, I think it's a starting point. I'm very pleased that this has been a focus, actually, that the Chancellor has set in train. I think Margaret's efforts on the PAC in the last Parliament helped to really focus the Treasury on making sure that dealing with international tax rules was something that was actually done rather than talked about. And there's been a huge amount of work, and there's more ongoing with the OECD to try and actually improve the position with this base erosion that goes on and this profit shifting that we see. International tax rules, as Mr. Britton said, are as they are, and the only way we as Britain can really improve how we do that is to both change our laws locally, and the transparency that Margaret talks about is very important.
Do you fully back what Margaret's saying about transparency?
I think what we need to understand, and I get terribly because I'm a chartered accountant. Before I was a politician, I was a chartered accountant, working mostly looking after small businesses. But I trained in London with a big, big organisation dealing with big companies. And the frustration is this narrative that goes on. Well, they make $6 billion. That's their turnover. So corporation tax is charged on profit. Now we need to understand the profit on those sales, but we're not looking to tax turnover, and I think there's a media narrative which is wrong, which completely warps the whole conversation. Starbucks, all Starbucks are franchises. That's a whole different thing again.
Are you saying that potentially this is a completely fair and correct amount?
No, I think it's a good start. I think we have failed completely to make sure, as Britain, that we are monitoring exactly as Margaret says, that if they are UK-based sales, they are not using international rules which allow them to move that. We have to make sure that we're very clear how our rules work here, and we are tightening them up slowly.
I accept
slowly.
It's on profit. Of course it's on profit. But the point is we don't know the profit.
Indeed.
All we know is the turnover. We do know, we did discover when we did this inquiry that Google said they made £9 billion worth of profit in Ireland. That's where they accounted for all the UK sales. And let me just put one other ingredient in there, because it's the secrecy that makes this life so difficult. In France, they are pursuing Google for £1 billion of unpaid tax. The French market for Google isn't as big as the British market. So if the French authorities...
Well, I think that's absolutely right, and I think this first deal which was reached is a step. HMRC is actually starting to do what it's there to do, which is to challenge these big organisations.
How do you explain that discrepancy with the figure
Well,
in France?
this is HMRC's first attempt at a deal. I don't think it's enough. They must carry on.
So this isn't the last of this.
As far as I'm concerned, it's not, and certainly as a new member of the PAC, we're going to continue to push the foot.
When we talk about
this one is the deal that's been arranged on a historic basis, but I think that's where they've got to. We're going to be getting HMRC in to talk to them about it and try and understand more clearly exactly how they propose to keep going to improve
just explain
the tax take that they get.
Let me just say this, because HMRC won't tell you anything. We had them in time and time again. And every time you ask them about the individual tax affairs of any company, and Google's not alone in this, every time they say, we can't tell you, it's confidentiality of taxpayers' interest. So I wouldn't have HMRC in, I'd have Google in. And the other thing I'd say is, I think Google thought they were being really clever on Friday night. I think they thought, we'll put this figure out, £130 million, that's a heck of a lot of money to you, me, all of us here. We think that's a lot of money. It's only when you see the extent of Google's business that you realise how trivial it is in relation to their overall business. They thought that they could get away with a sort of PR stunt to convince the British public that they were paying the fair share of tax in the same way as all of us around this table do. I think that was they got it wrong, and I do hope that the community now. I think you should get Google in. Don't bother with HMRC. They won't tell you anything. Get Google in.
I think both. I think both, Margaret, absolutely, and the other enormous, multinationals who are using the tax rules to move their money around to best effect for them. But I think the challenge is to make sure that HMRC are actually going to be driving forwards. I'd quite like to meet some of the lawyers who do this work, because it's not Dame Lynn Homer who's going out doing this negotiating. It's a bunch of secret lawyers who I've never met yet. I'd like to actually talk to them about how they intend to do the best for the British taxpayer. Google pay VAT, they pay PAYE, all the employee taxes for their stuff. There's lots of tax that is paid by these multinationals, but actually corporation tax is for profit, and if they are genuinely making profits on their sales, and I imagine they are because they're a very successful business, a proportion of that should be British sales. That's what we need to be making sure we're focused on.
Let's bring in our other guest, Steve Lewis, joining us via Skype, small business owner. You took part in the documentary The Town That Took on the Taxman. What do you think about all of this?
Yeah, I'm a fair tax town person that has just sat aghast listening to two politicians who have created the most complex tax regime in the world. We're the lowest tax rate in the G20, and yet we're dealing with philosophies of big companies that are only interested in a 0 to 3% tax rate. So no matter what you have as the standard rate, these guys get out of bed in the morning to try and get down to 0. It's a race to the bottom.
Absolutely. So who do you blame? Who do you blame here then? The politicians?
I blame both the politicians and the accountants that and tax lawyers that make a fortune out of these tax bullies, trying to not contribute what is a reasonable price of entry to be on our high streets. Citizens, communities, the national well-being is directly affected. 20 to 40 billion a year of tax not paid by these tax bullies.
I agree with
They
Steve.
negotiate their way out of trouble every single time. And this latest one has been created 6 years ago.
I agree with you.
We think 120 million is a good deal.
I agree with you, Steve, and I think the work that you've been doing to defend small business is really important. And I also agree with you that some of the problem is with us, the politicians. We've got the most ridiculously complex tax system. We've got over 1,100 tax reliefs. Everything from gift aid, tax relief. And everyone becomes a loophole. Everyone becomes a loophole.
Don't blame the civil servants. It's not HMRC's fault.
No, I agree.
You've given the tools to these companies for them to use against you.
I agree.
We need to put this in the hands of the public opinion. And I've got, as you know, on change.org, a petition today to be the people's taxman sitting on the HMRC board. We've got 125,000 signatures in less than 4 days.
I agree, and I think every chancellor, this is not a party political point, every chancellor uses the budget to introduce yet another tax relief. I think we should actually tear up lots of the tax code, make it much more simple. But
well, let's put it in hands of the viewers. The
but
viewers
hang on a
will
minute.
make companies be. The viewers will
Okay.
make
No,
companies be accountable.
I agree. But let me just say this. What we're dealing with the multinationals is different, because what they're doing is setting up, as you saw, artificial companies all over the world in low tax or no tax jurisdictions, in tax havens or no tax jurisdictions. They're setting up.
You have 4,500 UK brands that are listed as aggressive tax avoiders. 4,500.
Sorry to interrupt you both, but I do want to bring in Lucian, because he's sitting and desperately wants to come in as well.
Yes.
Lucian, you're a small business owner. Do you think there's a level playing field out there?
I don't think there's a level playing field, but I don't think you can blame a business for taking advantage of the rules that have been put in place by successive governments and have not been changed. So you cannot blame Google for doing what it's supposed to do. We're a country that are trying to attract international investment, and so we need a competitive tax regime. Now, at the moment, what is being said is that it's perhaps too competitive and needs to be changed. But you can't really vilify Google for doing what it can to mitigate its tax. If I can mitigate my tax, I will.
So do you think that the politicians are vilifying Google? Is that what
Well, I think the public are vilifying Google. I think the reporting, the soundbite reporting that doesn't look into the whole holistic how much tax overall is Google paying, are vilifying Google. I think the fact that, you know, HMRC, Margaret, have investigated Google for 6 years, and you say it's not transparent. Well, what the hell are we paying HMRC to do? Well, you know, I mean, they must know.
But can I just come back to you on they only abide by the law? Because I got that the whole time. A lot of the very rich accountants, I'm afraid, and lawyers who make money out of it said to me, it's your fault, it's the law. Now, Parliament makes the law to a certain purpose. What you then get, there's a purpose behind Parliament bringing in any tax relief or bringing in a tax law. What then happens is the accountants and the lawyers go off and they deliberately find a loophole. So they're interpreting Parliament's law for a purpose it was never intended. And I think there's a moral and ethical dimension on this. I think Google, they make money here in the UK. You make money in here, and if you get money out of people, you also have a duty to actually put something back into the common pot for the common good. And I don't buy this argument that they pay other taxes, VAT and PAYE. We all pay a range of taxes. I pay my council tax, I pay VAT.
But it all comes out of somebody making a profit somewhere.
Or earning money. And it's as much as the earning money.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much for a lively debate on that.
World.